How's it going, Patreon folks? Today we're going to be working on a really cool text animation here, all done fairly procedurally. I have this big, really cool line of just cool Voronoi nodes, and this kind of animates through. And we also made a really cool camera rig that I'll show you how to work on. Here we have this big Bezier line where the camera goes up, kind of zooms out or whatever, and goes way up. So I'm going to show you how to do all of that. So let's go straight into a new Blender file. Let's go up. And it is Patreon week. I can't remember if I said that already, but it's Patreon week, so you guys are going to be getting a bunch of cool stuff this week. I'm going to go ahead and get this. I'm going to hit S5, and then I'm also going to stretch. This direction. I'm going to hit Control A, apply scale. All right. Let's head straight into shading. I'm going to minimize these two windows here. I'm going to click on the camera icon on the right and switch over to Eevee, and then just turn on these boxes. All right, let's go and start making our grid, basically. So bring this up, Shift A, search emission. We're going to get that. We're going to get a mix shader. We're going to plug the mix shader into the surface, and then we also need a transparent. We'll get our transparent node. We actually want to plug it on the top socket instead of the bottom, so we can just kind of swap these for organization. And then we are also going to get a color ramp. Get the color ramp right there and plug it into our mix shader. So the basis of this whole thing is a brick texture. So Shift A, search brick texture with the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. Control T on that brick texture so we can get an object coordinate, and we'll plug color into the color ramp. I'm gonna give my scale at 1. Mortar smoothness bring to 0. We can bring that mortar size down to something like this. Now you can see how this is black. That's supposed to be transparent. So we're going to go ahead and enable that. So in the little icon right there for shading, we're going to go from blend mode to alpha blend. That's going to enable our transparency here in Eevee. We're going to go ahead and bring that frequency to 4. Gives us some more variation here in the lines. And then we can play with that line here. So we can do something like this. We can go ahead and 90 degrees, rotate those lines so they kind of face this direction, because our text is going to be laying right about there. I'm going to go here to the official render view and then bring our world brightness down to black. Okay, let's introduce some color into this scene. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this color ramp. I'm going to plug it into the color of the emission, plug the brick texture color into the color ramp, and we're going to get 3 colors. So I'll hit the plus icon on the color ramp and go from linear to constant. And then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to make this a darker, closer to gray. We're going to make this a nice blue, and we're going to make this a fiery reddish orange, something like that. And then we're going to bring this in. We want a little bit more white, and then bring that strength up. Now we have this. Let's go ahead and add some variation into this to give it more of a techie looking sci-fi glitch look. So we're going to go ahead and get in a Voronoi. One of my favorite nodes for style. Go from 3D to 4D so we can actually animate this. F1 to F2 to add more detail into our pattern, and from Illucidian to Chebyshev. Bring your scale to 0.4. Now we have this craziness. Actually, no, it needs to be a little bit higher, something like this. So we need to mix these two together so it's not just the Voronoi. We're going to get in a mix RGB, plug the mapping into the color 2 so we can kind of play with the two of them, and then we're going to go from mix to add to get a better mix of the two. So now look at that. We have something really cool. Now that because we made it 4D, if we play with the W, we get a really cool animation. We can maybe make this a little bit bigger. Look at that. How cool is that? We're going to go ahead and save. So we're going to go ahead and go to the desktop and just call this for tutorial Patreon. All right. Now that we have that, we need to make another pattern to show up when we kind of zoom in on our text. Because the problem is if we put text right here, this is such a cluttered design the text won't be our focal point. It'll just kind of look muddy within all this design. This is going to show up when our camera is going toward our scene. Before we do that, though, let's go ahead and hit Shift D on our plane, because we're going to have 3 more. What that's going to do is give us a really nice look of depth with these patterns, so that when we're moving through it, now looks terrible. That actually looks really cool, but we're going to flip them around in just a second. So let's go ahead. I'm going to hit G and move these up. I'm going to hit Shift, right click, and slide so that we can start working on the next pattern and they can just go straight into these. So let's go ahead and get in a gradient texture, GRA, gradient texture, and we're going to get this mapping node. Let's go ahead and bring it down, plug the vector into the vector of the gradient, and then we can go ahead and get a color ramp just in case. I'm not sure if I used this in the original design, but just in case we're going to do it. Plug the color into the color ramp, and we're going to go to quadratic sphere. So now we have a sphere in our scene. Now we're going to go ahead and Voronoi this sphere here. So we're going to go ahead and just duplicate this Voronoi, and then we're going to get a mix shader. Look how cool that looks. Oops, I meant to say mix RGB. So I guess we can just plug that right there, plug the vector into the color 2, and then we need to go here to overlay right there. So now we have this. What we're going to do is bring the scale to 0.4, make it nice and big, bring our factor somewhere over here, and then I'm going to go ahead and take one of these planes and move it so negative 180, so we get sort of a flipped version of it. And then we're going to take this plane and just kind of rotate him 180, so we get some variation in this, and it looks really cool, and that's what we kind of want to work with. So what I want to do here is actually flip these two, because I want them to be mostly blue in the scene, so something like this. All right, so now we have something that looks really cool. Let's go ahead and mix these two patterns together to make them basically speak to each other in a really cool way and mix in a really cool way. So let's get in another mix RGB, plug it there. We'll plug this one on the bottom socket. Oops. Plug this one, color 2 on the bottom socket, color 1 here. So now they're mixing in kind of an ugly way. We're going to go ahead and get a color ramp. And we're going to use this Voronoi texture to mix them together. So now what's going to happen is if I bring it this way, it just reveals this big pattern here. So now you can have these two mixing together like that. So we're going to start out like this. Let's go ahead and just bring this over here, and let's get our text. So let's see. We'll go back here to the layout, Shift A, and get in some text. Here we go. Took me forever to find that. And then we're going to go ahead and rotate the text 90 degrees to fit here. And we are going to bring it up so it kind of hovers above our pattern. And then we're going to go here to center here on the paragraph, center and center. We're just going to all caps DUCKY. In this case, just type in whatever you'd like. And then what's really cool in the font section, if you just click the file, it brings up this big library of fonts that are already on your computer. And so now you can just use those. I'm going to go back here to the materials, and we're going to click emission, and we're going to bring that emission pretty bright. So what we want the text to do is actually face this direction. So I actually did not mean to rotate it by 90 degrees. I shouldn't have done that. All right, now we are here. So now we have this whole scene going here. All right, so we're back in the shading view. And so what you can do is actually animate this really big one if you'd like, or just leave it. And then you can actually animate this Voronoi. As you can see, it's kind of moving around. So what we're going to do is start with our camera rig. So what we're going to need to do, go back here to layout, flat view. Let's get our camera rig going. So we're going to go here to a regular path, and then that needs to be rotated by 90 degrees here. And then we want the path to stop right in the middle of our scene. So that's where the path is going to end. So we're going to hit tab to go to edit mode, and then we're going to select this end one. We're going to hit E for extrude and Y to bring it out. Now, if you are at a different axis instead of Y, maybe you'll need to do X. So E, X. So whatever your scene is at, that's what you'll do. So E, Y, and we're just going to keep extruding this until the end of our scene. So we'll just go ahead and quickly do that. And the reason why is we're basically, not only are we making this longer, but we are also subdividing it, because if we just hit the scale, it wouldn't make it subdivided enough and it wouldn't bend the way we want it to for our camera rig. Now we have that. What we're going to do is get in our camera like this, and we're going to go here to constraints, follow path, target, NURBS path. So now he's linked all the way to the end here. We're going to get one more empty, and that's going to be a regular plane axis, and we want it to be in the direct middle of our text. What that's going to do is when we go back to our camera and add in the track to constraint and select that empty, wherever this empty is, that camera is going to point. So now we don't have to worry about actually animating the direction of the camera, because it's going to animate for us. So let's go ahead and click on this. We're going to bring it up to right about there. I want to kind of see how that looks on our scene. I'll actually go back to shading here really quick, because I want to see how this is going to look when the lines are like this. Okay, so we'll start them out at like that, and then bring some of that red back in. Okay, cool. So I like where that's at. What we're going to do is hit tab, hit this one right here, and then I'm going to click this proportional editing. Actually, we might as well just do it in the layout so you guys can see what's going on. So turn on proportional editing, get your arrow, and then bring it up, and you use the scroll wheel on your mouse to tell it how many to bring up with you. And then there we go. So let's go ahead and see how that looks. Let's see if I did it right the first time. So if you click on the camera, go back to constraints. So if you click on the camera, we go back to constraints, make sure you're not in edit mode. I had made that mistake before. And we bring that offset in. It does that. It does kind of invert. So we can do is bring that camera up like this. So let's go ahead and bring this up just a little bit more. And I'm going to hit EY and extend that out just a little bit more. And then I'm going to make this smaller like that. So animation's pretty ugly. We'll worry about that in a second. So how it would look here at the end of our animation, once we actually animate it, it would actually look, like this. So let's go ahead and start working on this final look to make it look good, because right now it's pretty ugly and I don't like it. So we can go ahead and bring this factor in to be something like this. We can bring that gradient in. Let's go ahead and play with our scale. So let's bring this color ramp in to just see what we're working with right here, because I don't want to see those gradient circles, but you can see how the gradient is working. So that's what we kind of want to use. So you can just play with the W until you like this final look. Let's bring it back to 0. Looks way too ridiculous. Something like this. So this is where you can just start working on the look of your scene. Also, you can kind of animate it like this too, which would be kind of nice. I like this right here. And then we can actually work on the scale a little bit more. But you can see how cool this is as an animation. All right, so we can stop it there. That looks really, really cool. Then Then we can bring in some of these lines back to add some more small detail. And again, they animate, so we can play with that. So now we can start actually animating this scene. So if you go for your edit, preferences, and then here in the animation, make sure your default interpolation is on Bezier. So, and then we can start animating the scene. So let's go to the camera, go to our constraints and go to 0. So now we're working with this. Let's click on this and bring all those lines back in to give you a really cool look. And we'll start the animation process. So I'm going to bring this down and I'm going to give myself a timeline. So click on the camera here, right click on, actually just click here on this offset, and then I'm going to give myself about 110 frames for the animation, and then get the offset and bring it up to where you like, right there. Now if we press play, nice. I'm going to make it a little bit longer to make that ending a little bit smoother. All right, cool. Now let's go ahead and animate the material. So we're going to start with all these lines, and we're going to animate this color ramp. So right about here, we'll start transferring to the new look. So right about to frame 68, right-click on the position, insert keyframe, and then right here, we'll go ahead and bring it there, insert keyframe. So now you can see those lines disappear. Now we have that ending look, nice and minimal, but really cool and techy. Now let's go ahead and animate the W. So we'll go back to our preferences and go from Bezier to linear, and we'll animate the W on these leading lines. So insert keyframe, go to the very end, do something like that, insert keyframe. So now we have a really cool animation, and we're done. We are done. Let's go and see how that looks. Now we have a really cool, really nice animation, and we're done. So there you go, guys. That is how you create this animation. Thank you guys for supporting me on the Patreon. We have one more tutorial, some shaders, and some really cool stuff coming in this week. This is Patreon week again. So thank you guys for watching. You will get the project file for this, and I'll see you in the next video.